there is a new documentary that's called Real Fur. It's hopefully not damning, but it may be.
My name is Taimoor Choudhry. I went undercover to investigate the fur trade. What I discovered will shock you to your core.
Is that a polar bear? Are they on the endangered list?
The story of how I ended up here is inseparable from the making of this film. My life consisted of fashion shows, having parties, but something was wrong. Something was missing in my life. I found myself wondering how much cruelty is hidden behind all our fashion fur.
If consumers knew the truth about these practices, would never say that's a humane way to kill animals, not in a million years.
Fur is a relic of a cruel and uninformed age.
I thought to myself, you're just too small. How are you going to make that change?
How can people get involved in this movement?
It's now time for Canada to end the cruel and dangerous practice of commercial fur farming, and that is exactly what this legislation will do.
And welcome to this post-premiere screening and discussion of this incredible film, Ending Real Fur. We've got a fabulous panel. I want to just say, Taimoor Choudhry, you made an incredible film. You are changing hearts and minds. We have watch parties going on all over the United States and Canada right now, and I'm getting so many texts. People are just blown away, and they want to join the movement to end fur farming. But I've got to start with Tim Gunn, who, of course, you know from Project Runway and Making the Cut. Tim, you were really the first fashion leader to come out long before it became popular to do so and say, fur is an abomination, we got to stop it. Why were you able to see the cruelty that so many others in the industry, the fashion industry, seemed capable of ignoring? And how did you get this movement off the ground?
Well, Jane, it had to do with my many, many years at Parsons School of Design, and the last 7.5 of which I was chair of the fashion department at Parsons. And the department had been working with fur, and I was absolutely, I don't have the adequate words to even say. I just thought I need to give my students the other side of the story. And quite frankly, I invited PETA to say, there's another side to this that is anti-fur and that really allows you to say, I'm going to accept responsibility for my decision making. And that's how it all started, to be perfectly honest. And the students responded so profoundly to the cruelty of fur and what it instills in animals, and it, a great and quite frankly joyous kind of epiphany that this can be changed, this can be evolved. And my students, I have to say, and this goes back 22 years, have been catalysts in helping change the fashion industry.
Well, you certainly got the ball rolling, let's put it that way. And now fur has been described as, oh my gosh, politically incorrect, fabric non grata, passé, fashion faux pas, vulgar, contrarian indicator. And yet they're still killing 100 million animals every year for fur. So I want to go straight out to the star director, producer, Taimoor Choudhry. Again, what an extraordinary film. But how is it possible that so many major brands have given up fur? I mean, I could just be here all night. Versace, Michael Kors, Gucci, Armani, the Neiman Marcus Group, Burberry, et cetera, et cetera. They've given up fur, but yet we're still killing 100 million animals for fur every year.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that fur is dead, but at the end of the day, the brands are listening to the consumers. But what the problem is the government isn't listening to us right now. So the brands are all giving it up. The government is just way behind listening to everybody, and they're just not fast enough. And we've been campaigning for so long. I mean, Tim has this beautiful campaign in New York, and they almost got a ban on fur farms over there. But I think the fur industry just needs one more push, like a really big push to kill it forever.
Well, that is your film, hopefully. And I have to say, while Unchained TV has the online premiere, there was a premiere in Toronto. A lot of this film centers around Canada. We had a videographer there, and people were raving about this film.
It's an eye-opener. I think that's what society needs right now. The general public has to see it. They talked about it being dog fur. It's just activating me to do more.
Now I feel like I want to be an anti-fur activist.
A lot of people here are not activists. It seemed as though they were pretty moved by it.
I'm a model. I'm a photographer for the fashion industry.
I'm actually very inspired watching this whole thing, just seeing how much progress they made about all the retailers that have dropped fur, different fashion designers, people in parliament, general people. Like, everyone's waking up to the reality of this cruel industry.
So I want to go to Alissa White-Gluz. You are a protester in the film. And of course, you are the lead vocalist for the incredible group Arch Enemy. Where are the young people? Because fur is increasingly associated with an old lady's fur coat. But yet that fur trim, the young people seem to be embracing it. Where do we stand?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, music, which is where I live, is very much a part of, in a way, gatekeeping a culture. And of course, fashion is as well. And as much as the people at the top dictate what's cool and what's trendy, it's also, like Taimoor just said, it's the consumers that dictate that as well. And so I think it has to come from both sides. And so if we can show that consumers aren't interested in that anymore and it's not cool, then the people at the top producing those items will be less inclined to use those trims. And I do think that also especially in Canada, because it's so cold here, there is a very clear downturn in the interest in fur coats. And I've also seen a lot more brands offering alternatives to the more popular fur trims that are popping up. So I think we're on the right path, but I do think that it's time for legislation to just, like Taimoor was saying, put that final nail in that coffin and just end that. And I think consumers are ready for the next big thing, because it's culturally, it's different all around the world, but especially right here in Canada, where we so badly need warm coats, people are more and more turning away from things like fur just because they don't like how it looks.
Well, I mean, look, we all know that fur is unnecessary. When these climbers go to the top of whatever mount, they're not wearing fur coats. We've got sophisticated, high-tech alternatives to fur. There is no necessity to wear fur. That argument is certainly out of the window. But it seems like just when fur is just about dead, I've noticed, because I've attended some of these protests, that some entertainer decides, I'm going to get all the cameras looking at me and I'm going to show up drenched in fur at some award ceremony. And honestly, Tim, I think they need to ban that. The award ceremonies and these big institutions need to say, if you come drenched in fur, you are persona non grata. And that holds for halftime shows, etc.
I agree with you, Jane. I mean, people should just not cover it. And I've been on the red carpet in Los Angeles where it's been 60 degrees and there have been stars wearing fur coats, looked at me and said, well, I didn't kill it. And my response wasn't at the time, but should have been, well, maybe you should have.
Yes, well, you raise a very important point, because this film brilliantly goes into the exploitation of humans, the people who have to kill these animals for a living. And you're nodding your head, Lesley Fox of the Fur Bearers, based in Canada, where a lot of this film occurs. It is human exploitation as well, is it not?
It is. The fur industry and the fur issue, it's a really unique issue in that it encompasses animal welfare, certainly, but there is very much a human dimension in the workers and also human health, which this film picked up on, which, of course, the COVID connections. There's an environmental component as well. All of the feces and the waste associated with these farms make its way into our streams and rivers. And so it's a myriad of issues, a myriad of problems. We heard in the film from Dan Starr, which is, in my opinion, one of the most impactful pieces of this film, was this testimony from someone who worked on a farm for many years and what he witnessed. And it's just heart-wrenching.
Oh, we're getting so many comments. This documentary was very well done. I kept wishing I was in the position of having non-vegans over to watch it with me. Yeah, I mean, we want this not to just be seen by animal activists and people who love animals. We want this to be seen by people who are clueless and who are simply, I don't think bad people. I think just not thinking about what goes into the products that they're worrying. And Tim, I have to go back to you on this. What can we do to ultimately change the culture? Because even though most of the major designers have shunned fur, it seems like there's sort of if not a black market, sort of an off-brand, sort of cheapo. I know I grew up in New York, where every Christmas time on 57th near Fifth Avenue, there was this sort of pop-up shop where they were selling all these furs, these really gaudy, ginormous furs. And it wasn't even really a brand. It was just somebody with a lot of fur trying to make some money.
And Jane, I have to tell you, that still persists, and it's repugnant. And we need to just rally and say, this is unacceptable. This is not the way that we should be conducting our lives. And it's for me, it's all about education, because in my heart, that's what I am. I'm an educator. And it's about, first of all, making choices, but making informed choices. And when you're really informed about what the whole fur trade is about, how can you possibly say, I'm going to wear a fur coat? You can't.
Oh, it's horrific. And one thing I want to say, having covered this for many years, is, you know, people sometimes say, oh, you anti-fur activists are so strident. They love to use the red paint, which I've never seen in 30 years of activism. I mean, maybe somebody did that once 40 years ago, but they keep bringing up the red paint. And, you know, the truth is, and you can address this, Taimoor, every single designer who uses fur is written to politely. They're sent videos. They're asked nicely to please stop engaging in this violent industry and this product, and they ignore it for the most part. And then you have to up the ante by doing demonstrations. Then it becomes in-store demonstrations. And I know in the case of one very famous designer, his moment at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the pinnacle of society, was disrupted, not violently, but very confrontationally, with sounds of screaming, slaughtered fur animals. And that was the only reason. Ultimately, it was just a very short term after that he announced with PETA he was giving up fur. Taimoor.
Well, you have to actually get into the mindset of these people. You're up against like $1 billion industry. Canada Goose itself has it's $1 billion company. So when these companies are being threatened, they spend all this money into advertisement for fur and making it seem like appealing. So it's not really anybody's fault that they like fur. And it's not even, they like to exploit us activists as well and show them that, these are just a bunch of crazy people showing red paint around, and they're just, don't listen to them, don't take them seriously, and try to focus on just the negative action. When one of the most beautiful things that I actually discovered was the protesters themselves. When they're outside picketing in the cold, when they're standing out there and they're, yelling slogans and try to get people to actually listen and understand what's going on, they're putting themselves out there. It's like, I would compare it to being in a war zone. They're being pushed around, they're being shoved around, they're being manhandled, they're being, and it's literally like really intense to be out there. But you see them tirelessly going there week after week and protesting, and it actually really works. I think that's what the movie shows, that protesting and having a voice against this actually really works, because these companies, they listen to this kind of publicity and they back off. And that's why a lot of these companies are going for free.
Yes, and you happen to premiere your film on UnchainedTV on the same day as Black Friday, which is also known as Fur Free Friday. There was a protest demonstration in Beverly Hills, which Unchained TV covered. I'm going to play a little bit for you, and then we can discuss on the other side.
On January 1st, 2023, California made history by becoming the first fur-free state in the nation. It is now illegal to manufacture and sell fur in California. So what I wanted to ask you guys to do is to be your own fur police. Find a fur store near you. Just go on maps and type in fur store and go visit and just pretend you're shopping for your mother or your aunt, which is what I did. And he happily showed me, both stores happily showed me all of their new fur. This was just 4 or 5 months ago. They were flippant when I asked them about the new law.
I mean, that's pretty outrageous, Alissa White-Gluz. California's become the first state to ban the sale of new fur products, and yet who's enforcing it? Yes, it's a huge victory because as California goes, so goes the nation. But you just heard they're doing undercover investigations and finding that people are ignoring it, some of these stores.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a very complex issue, as are all animal rights issues. And like the film touched on, there's so many different facets to it and so many different things that we could actually be examining to take down this industry. And we have been for decades. And anecdotally, I've done a lot of fur protests, and I've seen how people react to it. And there's a huge variety there too. And I would say, of course, the bill that we're pushing through is a great step. And another thing that might be really interesting to examine is really see if there's a way to study the demographic of who is buying fur, because then we know what language to speak. And so, I mean, reaching out to people's compassion, I mean, most people can't afford a fur coat and wouldn't have any use for one, but there is a demographic that is interested in that. And that might be the demographic that also influences culture. And so I think, there's a lot of money that goes into influencing culture in sometimes obvious ways and sometimes less obvious ways. And I think that might be something that we would need to tackle just because of what was brought up earlier in this conversation.
Well, I think you've hit on a super important point. And the point being, who is the customer? I do feel that fur has become a contrarian indicator. And I do have to start with Tim Gunn. You are the fashion legend. You have your finger on the pulse of fashion. It seems not just passé, but almost gross, especially in light of during the pandemic, tens of millions of mink were killed because they had developed COVID in the fur farms in Denmark. And it was really gross to see all these mink being put into dumpsters. It seemed to rob any shred of glamour that fur still had. It went right out the window. What impact did the COVID killing of all these mink in Denmark and other places have? And where does it stand? Is it still, in some minds, a status symbol?
Oh, Jane, I'm so happy that you brought this up, because COVID had a devastating effect in many ways on seeing how horrible and disastrous this has had on the whole industry. And does anyone know how small a mink is? They're tiny. Think about that when you think about how many mink go into a fur coat, and it's just preposterously confounding to me that people can support this. The notion of wearing fur and not be completely appalled.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I just want to get now to the goal of this film. And we're going to ask Taimoor and, of course, Lesley, because you are in Canada, and there is an effort as a result of this film. This proposal, this Canadian legislation, came about as a result of this film. Let's take a look at it and then discuss on the other side to see if this could be the game changer.
Here's a draft of
the proposed legislation.
I was here last December. I was like, hey, what do you think about a ban on fur farms? And now here we are drafting this bill.
Commercial fur farming is cruel to the animals that face horrible conditions every day, and it poses a real risk to human health, including pandemic risk. Many countries have already put an end to this practice, and Canada should do the same.
So Taimoor, and then we'll go to Lesley. How did this film inspire legislation? That's pretty amazing.
Well, after about year 4, I had finished my student movie, and I was like, it was about a 25-minute movie. And I thought to myself after finishing it, I was like, is this what you wanted to accomplish with this movie? I mean, is this how much, what are people going to do? They're going to look at the movie and they're going to just, feel bad and just turn it off and watch the next commercial that's on. So I thought to myself, I need to have tangible change in this movie. And what should I do? And so, I just walked into MP Nathaniel Erickson-Smith's office and I was like, what can we do? And he's like, well, I didn't know anything about Canadian politics at this point. And he said, well, we should read a bill in Parliament. And we just came up with it. You see in the movie, I walk into his office. Here's this fresh off the boat, Pakistani Canadian, walks into his office. Hey, why don't we do a bill together? And he's like, that's a fantastic idea. And that's just like that. We got the bill started, and Animal Justice followed so closely with us. They helped us draft the bill. And Lesley can speak more about the legislation itself, because she actually has mink farming banned in BC. So that's a really big win for us.
Wow. Well, tell us about it, Lesley.
Yeah, that was quite an undertaking. And so for the US listeners, Canada is made up of provinces. So we don't have states in Canada. It's provinces and territories. And mink farming or fur farming more broadly is managed at the provincial level. So each province has its own rules. And in British Columbia, there were 3 farms that were detected with COVID. And what was happening, quite simply, people were passing the virus to animals. Animals were passing the virus to people. There was information coming out through our Freedom of Information requests that even wild animals were infected. And so it was really creating this perfect storm, attracting a ton of attention, a lot of groups, we all got together, we worked together. But one of the game changers, I think, with this issue, and again, it comes up in the film, is the importance of Indigenous voices. And for a long time, the fur industry hijacked those voices and represented Indigenous people through this notion that all Indigenous people are okay with the fur trade, and the fur trade is such a wonderful thing. And here you have in the film, and through our experience, we have many Indigenous people saying that fur farming is not within the value system of Indigenous peoples. It's not a traditional way of life. It's not based on sustenance, that it's a gross exploitation of these animals. And so having the involvement of the BC Union of Indian Chiefs was extremely significant to getting this bill passed. So again, in British Columbia, just mink farming is prohibited. Unfortunately, other animals are still legally allowed to be raised for their fur. There's also a chinchilla farm. And then across Canada, we've got fur farming in other provinces. And recently, the fur bearers discovered, and quite shockingly, is that it's not just fox and mink. Very, very recently, within the last few days, it was breaking news that we've discovered wolf, bobcat, and lynx fur farms in Canada.
Oh my God.
Absolutely horrendous. And it's shocking information, because this whole time, so much emphasis has gone into, mink and fox, which certainly, that's upsetting. But we've come to discover now there's so many more species that we didn't know about. And it's absolutely appalling. It's alarming, but it's something we can do something about. And I really strongly believe that the fur issue, it's low-hanging fruit. Fur is a luxury product that no one needs. Alternatives exist, not just fake fur, but there's so many different textiles that are available. And it really is about creating political will now. I think a lot of people got the memo back in the 80s, but it really now is about sophistication, and it's about taking these protests but elevating them to political engagement. We need to be talking to our political representatives, whether that's at the state level, whether that's at the provincial level, the federal level, national level. We need to be contacting our political representatives and making animals a priority, making it an issue that as a voter, you want to see action for animals. And that's the part that we're just not hitting that. We need the politicians.
Well, I want to find out what the status of the legislation is that came out of this film, but you just mentioned talking to political leaders. Tim Gunn, you've done that. Let's play the clip and then talk to you on the other side.
And the Emmy goes to Tim Gunn for Project Runway.
Honorable council members, the fashion business has a troubling history with animals. What's the right thing to do? And getting rid of fur is simply the right thing to do. And I'm just surprised Canada hasn't done it already.
So who are you talking to, and what impact is that having on the industry in Canada?
Well, I hope it's having a significant impact. And I wish it were having more of an impact here in the United States, because we seem to be so oblivious to this issue here. And it is profound. But as Lesley said earlier, it's also, these are high-end people who are buying fur. These are not just everyday people. And why are they not better informed about what the consequences are? Simply fundamentally don't understand it, because the entire is repugnant and totally unnecessary.
Well, here's what I don't get. I realize, and I'm ashamed, and my mother was an animal lover, and somehow I remember as a kid that she was getting a fur coat. I don't think she made the connection. I don't think any of us made the connection. And hopefully I can do a living amends for that, even though it wasn't my purchase decision. But it was definitely a status symbol when my mother was getting that coat. It said, I'm not poor, I'm married, whatever it is that she wanted to project, it projected that. No more. To me, when I see somebody in fur, I think low self-esteem, trying to look like they've got money, but they probably don't, because they would have more fashion sense than that. I mean, W Magazine called it a fabric non grata. Every article you read about fur, it's like they say it's hit the tipping point that it's really politically incorrect. You know, it's right up there with a chastity belt. Yet somehow some people have not gotten the memo, Taimoor.
Yeah, it's really like we're in the 20th century right now, and just some people.
Well,
just
21st actually.
21st century. Sorry, I'm still in a different dimension. I've been in 7 years in real fur time right now. So, and we're in the 21st century, and people just don't understand. They don't make the connection, and I'm guilty of it, just like everybody else. I mean, like I remember wearing one of those hoodies and those jackets, and walking and having my dog next to me and playing with him. He used to sniff my hoodie, and he used to be like sniffing it around. I'm like, I wonder why he's sniffing this hoodie. And I never made that connection. You're just oblivious. You don't make that connection. But once you actually look into what you're wearing, you find out that you're wearing your own dog around your neck. And so when you realize that you're wearing a dog, not that any other animal would be, it would be any different, but it's just, I thought to myself, and I was like, you look like a fool. And you've been walking around like this, and how many people have been. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this message to all the consumers, that because of the loose labeling laws, you might be wearing, you don't even know what you're wearing. And I wanted to bring this message to you guys and make you understand the pain and the horror behind this. And you just don't know, because of the loose labeling laws. You don't even know what you're wearing.
Well, first of all, I want to compliment you, because we've all made mistakes in our lives, but very few people have made amends for their mistakes by spending 7 years on a movie. So, forgive yourself, because you've really, to your credit, realized that you were kind of one of these conspicuous consumers buying all of this fashionable stuff, and then you saw the consequences and you changed. And that's what we need. Your journey in the film, from Playboy, high spending jewelry magnet, to animal activist going undercover. I mean, that's what I love about the film. It's a journey of transformation. And I mean, the question is, how do we get everybody to make that transformation? And, you know, I think about like cigarettes. Okay, as a teenager, I smoked cigarettes because I wanted to be cool. But then a photo came along, and it was probably the best advertising campaign in history. It was a woman smoking out of her trachea, and the headline said, "Smoking is very glamorous." And she was so hooked on smoking, even though she had cancer, she was smoking out of a hole in her neck. And I remember seeing that, and I remember saying, smoking is not cool. We need something like that for fur. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Jane. I think the word that comes to my mind is transparency. And I wanted to make a comment. You know, we've had some discussion about, you know, fur, it's for the rich, it's a luxury product, it's a status symbol. Rich people buy fur coats. But to be quite honest, I think that the fur industry has survived this long because it's not fur coats, and it's not about the rich. It's about the mass scale production of cheap fur that's mass available to everybody. And it's in dollar stores, it's in department stores, it's on cell phone cases, on handbags, keychains, earrings, eyelash extensions, dog toys, cat toys, children's toys, hair accessories. It's in little scrappy pieces and parts. It's dyed purple, it's shaved short, it's 99 cents. That's fur. That's the face of fur. It's no longer grandma's head to toe mink coat. I mean, that still exists to some extent, but the industry has stayed in business because they're peddling the cheapest, tackiest trinkets and making them available en masse. And without labeling laws and without transparency, and kind of with what you're talking about with, you know, graphic warnings and all this information, regular people and good people who know that, you know, animals suffer and who would never buy fur, I would argue many times mistakenly probably buy it thinking it can't be real fur because it is purple and because it's inexpensive. Like, people have different ideas, I think, of what fur looks like, what real fur can look like. And the reality is real fur can be cheap, and in many cases it can look fake. And that's the other issue we have, is many activists promote fake fur as the antidote. And the Fur Bearers is one of those organizations that have come out against fake fur, primarily for the reason being that we've conducted our own investigations, and time again at major department stores, major brands, we've come across fur that's been labeled fake and it's real. And we've also seen, you know, it go the other way, real fur being fake. And at the end of the day, unless you have a microscope in your purse, you don't know what you're buying. You just don't. We can make assumptions, but you really don't know unless you have that piece of fur under a microscope.
Isn't it ironic that the fake furs have gotten so sophisticated you can't tell? I remember I walked up to a woman who was dripping in fur and I said, "Shame on you for wearing fur." And she said, "This is fake." And I looked at her, I didn't know what to say, because I was like, how do I know whether she's telling the truth or not? Where do you stand on this, Tim Gunn?
Well, I think a fake fur should look fake, to be perfectly honest. I don't think it should be masquerading as a real fur. It should just own what it is, which is fake.
But how do we do that? How do we get the faux fur manufacturers to make it look fake or have fake? I mean, how do we make that happen?
Well, that is the question, Jane. You're absolutely right. And unless we can get people on board with how abhorrent this is, it's not going to happen. And I'm so glad that Lesley brought up the fact that now you can buy a 99-cent trinket that in fact is fur. So it's not just with deep pockets. It's really for everyone. And we need to change that. And thanks to Taimoor, we are.
Well, thanks to all of everybody over here. I mean, the kind of help that I've received, I was just a student. I walked into Lesley's office. She's like, "I'll educate you right now." Tim Gunn, I called him up and I was like, "Hey Tim, can you please help?" And he's been helping campaign with me since the beginning of this movie. It takes a lot of time and effort to campaign for this. It's now become a movement. It's more than just a movie. And the same thing for Alissa. Alissa just came out and she's like, "Oh, I have this song I'm thinking of writing for this movie. Do you want to use it?" She donated the song for free. She donated her time. She's coming to all the campaigns. And that's what we want everybody else to do in this, who is listening and watches this movie, is to come and join our movement and contribute in any way possible. Whether it's to go on our website and make Fur Farms history. It's really easy to send an email to the MP. You just have to click the button twice and it's gone to your relative MP. Whether it's doing that or whether it's just opting out and not buying any more fur, there's so many things you can do. You can come to one of our protests, get involved, and you'll see this movement become bigger and bigger. Now, it's an independent movie, and so we don't have $1 million marketing budget. And all of us, all the good people that you see in this panel and in the movie, they're all combining whatever they possibly can to market this movie and spread the word out. So even if you just take our reels and repost them on social media, you post a link, we've donated the movie for free. So the maximum amount of number of people can actually watch this. And so in any way, if you come and join us, that's when we're going to make the difference. And you guys are beacons of light. So please go out there and share all of this material so you can spread to your friends and they can make that change.
And let me say, this is streaming for free on Unchained TV. You can also, if you download Unchained TV, you can literally text this movie to whoever you want to text it to. So here's the thing. There may be people who I've run into them. They say, "Oh, it's my grandmother's fur." I had a woman at a grocery store and she was right in front of me. She's wearing a fur coat. I said, "Shame on you for wearing fur." And she said, "Oh, it's my grandmother's coat." And I literally said, "Well, if your grandmother wore a chastity belt, would you wear that?" And of course I was, but that's what came out. But in any case, I don't think that's an excuse either. PETA says, cut up the furs, give them to PETA. PETA will give them to houseless people who may be unhoused and need to stay warm, or also shelters where they have a whole system for making sure they're not resold. So if you have a fur, give it to PETA. They will take care of it. I want to also celebrate the victories. Let's talk about the big victory that occurred during the filming of this film. Canada Goose ditching fur after a massive PETA campaign. There are so many victories in this movement. We have to maintain a positive attitude because, wow, that was a huge victory. Who wants to start that one? Tim?
Well, I'll just say that you're right, Jane. There's a domino effect. And just speaking for myself, when I moved from Parsons to Liz Claiborne Inc., which at the time had 45 brands, we vowed to go fur free, and we did. And when I joined Project Runway, we were a fur show. Absolutely not even disputable. We were just going to be fur free. And I think that that's the fine line that has to be drawn for people to just get on board with this.
I also think that every single award ceremony needs to be reached out to and say, just tell all the people who are showing up, we will not put you on camera if you're wearing fur. I mean, there's got to be a way to get enough famous people together to do that. We've got two famous people on this panel discussion. So let me start with Alissa. How can we get the Grammys and the halftime shows and the Emmys and all these shows to say, fur is just not something we're going to allow on our shows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back down to just what the cultural significance of fur is. And again, when you're talking, let's say, other aspects of animal ethics like food, that's something everyone does every day. They have food every day. This is a decision they need to make 3 times a day for their meals, for their families. And that becomes a little bit more of a sticking point because people get very ingrained in their traditions and in their routines. But something like a coat, it's something that you only pull out for one season. You buy it maybe once every few years. And then you grow out of it and you give it to your little brother or your little sister, or, it's not something that's done all the time. And so I really do feel like people are more inclined to make a change like this when it's not something that affects their everyday life and it's something that's a one and done purchase. And I would be very curious to see Canada's metrics and see how ditching fur actually worked for them, because as far as I can tell, people are still like, okay, cool, I'll just get this other Canada Goose coat. So I do think that, of course, famous people on red carpets, that is definitely significant. A lot of them work with stylists, so getting through to them through stylists might be a way to do it as well. But also just bearing in mind that the consumer here, this is something that they do once in a while. And so when that time comes for that revolving, that new closet, that new coat that they're going to wear for the next 5 years, I think that the life cycle of fur we might be at a point where we can actually get it out the door and out of people's homes and just out of cultural significance within the next few years.
Absolutely. And I will say, I used to shop many decades ago at Neiman Marcus. And then when I had my epiphany about, not that I ever really wore fur, although maybe as a child, I might have had some kind of rabbit fur jacket if I go back to childhood. But I cut up my credit cards. I mailed it into Neiman Marcus and I said, I'm not shopping here as long as you supply fur. And she said, they responded, we believe in giving everyone choice. And then of course I said something, I wrote back, well, would you sell human skin? Would you give people that choice? And so that was where the conversation ended. But now, even though just a couple of years ago we were protesting outside Neiman Marcus, they've given up fur. They have given up fur. So we're winning. We're at the end of pretty much the end of this fantastic conversation. We could talk for 24 hours, but let's get final thoughts, because I personally think that we are winning. Unfortunately, the human population is expanding, and we have very little control over what's happening in certain countries where the culture in other words, it may be a fashion faux pas. And I even read this. It's a fashion faux pas in LA, which has banned the sale of new fur products. Certainly amongst a lot of fashionistas in New York, I'd say almost all, it's kind of like, ugh. But apparently in Monte Carlo, there's people are still wearing it. They may not be in the 21st century. They're still back in the 17th century. It's a global problem, and each country has their own battle against it, but we do live in a global culture. So, when half the world is watching the Oscars, that's why it's so important to make sure that nobody going into the Oscars is wearing fur, et cetera, et cetera. But final thoughts from everybody, starting with Tim Gunn. What is your final thought on where we're at? How close are we?
Oh, Jane, we're definitely winning, definitely. And I want to go back to something that Alissa said about stylists. They have to get on board with this because they're the ones who throw the fur at the stars. And if that can stop, then so much more of this pervasive visualization of fur will stop as well. But we're definitely winning. I am completely on board.
Yeah, and how soon? How soon can we say we're done with that and it's in the dustbin of history? What do you think?
Oh, I wish I knew. I hope within 10 years.
Okay, 10 years. Let's you know what? That's a blink of an eye in the span of geologic time. So let's go to Lesley Fox from the Fur Bearers. What's your final thought here?
I absolutely agree with Tim. I mean, the fur industry's days are numbered. They have been for a while. We've always said fur is in the category of cassette tapes, typewriters, and rotary phones. It's over. It's not controversial. It's over. I think businesses are cluing in that it's just good business to be fur free. I'm not sure if businesses do it out of the goodness of their hearts. I think they do it because it's a competitive advantage. Businesses who demonstrate a commitment to ethics and morals and true sustainability, win over consumers. It's good business. I will say, there's an element here that we didn't quite get to, though, about government subsidies. And so one of the reasons that the fur industry is still around is because it's inflated with taxpayer funds from government subsidies that help keep them afloat and drag them through. So the consumerism isn't driving it necessarily. In a large part, it's government programs and subsidies that keeping this industry afloat. So again, I think, we're halfway there. We've got, I really do believe we've got the majority of people, and opinion polls tell us that. We trend, usually opinion polls, 80% generally of people are opposed to killing animals for their fur. So that's a really good stat. Again, I think it's that political will. We really need to get our politicians on board, contact them, make it really personal, be very polite, and let them know that this issue is a priority. But I agree with Tim. I think 10 years is a realistic target. We're already seeing, fur bans at, different municipalities are tabling those bans. We've seen countries end fur farming. Lots of countries in Europe have prohibited fur farming. We've seen trapping as well, different bylaws or state laws, provincial laws related to trapping, leg hold traps, that type of a thing. So the momentum is there. We just need to keep it up. And I'm so encouraged by this film. And I really am so thankful for everyone who's working on this issue.
And thank you. You've done amazing work. So I want to go to Taimoor as we wrap up, because I'm still unclear as to what kind of a shot does this legislation that you got proposed in Canada have to ban fur farms in Canada, which is one of the hubs of the fur industry? I mean, if you pass that, that would be touchdown. How close are you?
We're exactly how close I was, let's say, 5 years ago. When I first started this project, when I was pitching this idea to people, even my writer, Julian, she thought I was going nuts. And she's like, unless you actually bring this to, record all of this, get it on camera, I can't write the story. And so when we're so close to it now. The bill's in Parliament right now. All we need is everybody to raise their voice and just contact their MPs and get one senator can take this to the next reading. And then there's a vote on this. And for the first time in history, we can actually get this bill passed. I mean, when you're looking at all of this, you're thinking, oh my God, what are these guys doing? And how long is this going to take? And honestly, my advice would be, be the change it's a quote that I read by Gandhi. It's like, be the change you wish to see in the world. So first begin that change within yourself. And you'll notice that all these help and all this stuff is going to start coming to make your journey a lot easier. Like Jane said, from Playboy to this spiritual person that I am now. I have a fiance now. She's my best friend, Hannah. She's been helping me. She's been supporting me. I have my guru right next to me. They're sitting right over here. I have a whole village and community of people that are just supporting me in every way, from meditation. I'm a nervous, anxious person. I was meditating. My guru was hitting the gong behind me. And just, that's all the help that you're going to get. You're going to get all of this help from the universe, from God, whatever you believe in. Look at this. We've got Tim Gunn and Alissa in the house supporting this cause. We're really close. If you guys come and join us, we've got this nailed.
I want to say, did we get everybody for final thoughts? Did you give your final thought? No, Alissa, saving the best for last.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to say that I think one of the things that's so impressive about the animal rights movement, and it's no different in this case, is how we have people from all different facets coming in. So lawmakers, people with their finger on the pulse of culture, people who influence, people who work in the factory farms, people on their own journeys, like Taimoor sharing everything that he went through. I think this is all really important because the viewer of the documentary is going to need to relate to someone. And like we saw with Ingrid's aha moment, which I believe was a buffalo, and Taimoor's aha moment, which was seeing one animal suffer and making that connection and realizing I'm not okay with this. I think that people experience that moment at very different times, and it's very difficult to put a blanket statement out that will affect everyone equally. And that's why I really think that all forms of activism are valid and important. And just like on this panel today, and just like everybody that was in the film, everything that's being said and done is important. And we work together in this sort of amalgam of forces coming together just to create a positive change. And so as final thoughts, I would just like to reiterate that Taimoor has made it very, very easy to send a message to Parliament, and it's like 2 or 3 clicks, and you just go to Make Fur Farms History, and then you have basically shared a vote against fur. So don't hesitate to do that, because that's extremely easy to do.
Well, I just want to say all of you give me hope for a better world. It's hard to see progress in real time, but on this issue, I feel a lot of progress has been made. And what I would ask is, do your part to help make sure everybody sees this film. Everybody knows someone who probably says, oh, it's not such a big deal, fur. And we've got to let them know that it really is a big deal, and it's got to end. So what you can do is you can literally download Unchained TV, which is a nonprofit, a streaming network. Everything is given for free, simply to change hearts and minds. That is our only agenda, is to let people know. And you can download it and you can text it to somebody. So if you download Unchained TV on your phone, you go right to that film. I just texted it to Alissa right before it started, and send it to those people who need to see it, because we all agree, but we need the rest of the world to watch Ending Real Fur and to help make fur farms history. You can go to watch.unchainedtv.com if you want to watch it online. And also, Unchained TV is also available on Amazon Fire Stick, Roku device, and Apple TV device. So you can download it and watch it on your phone. It's on the Apple TV device on my TV behind me, and it's really easy. It's 100% free. Please take a moment to download the app and watch Ending Real Fur if you haven't already seen it. If you have seen it, text it to somebody you know and take the action. It will be in the comments and in the subject line of the movie. You'll be able to take those actions. So I just want to say thank you very much. I'm really tickled and honored to have people I really look up to. Tim Gunn, you are, wow, if every fashion leader had your guts and your state of compassion, we'd live in a perfect world. And Alissa, same thing. We need all the musical stars out there, all the artists to get on board with this. And of course, Lesley, you're doing the hard work on the ground. And Taimoor, you are my hero for 7 years following this journey. And it has just begun, because now we're going to make sure lots of people see this movie. So thank you so much, everybody. And let's reconvene when we've banned fur farms forever.